CEO and Chairman of Caprica International. I would now like to hand it over to him. Thank you.
In the next hour session, we're going to try again. Salamat pagi. In the next hour session, we're going to. It's a little loud. Gentlemen, adjust slightly. Okay. I was born with a microphone already, so it amplifies when I turn this on. For the next hour, we're going to take a look with leading industry practitioners in the area of e-commerce, which is completely revolutionizing the retail industry and the banking industry. And the trends are moving dramatically here in Asia in different models. So looking at how the supply chain and banking are affected with e-commerce, we have two leading experts. We have Eric Carter, visiting fellow, senior fellow of decision sciences at the NUS Business School in Singapore, who's been out in Asia now for a few years. And basically, Keith has led supply chain initiatives in supply chain intelligence, knowledge management, transformational governance. And before that, he played a leading role in the Estee Lauder supply chain at a global level. So he brings a very strong, unique background in that space. And my old friend Eckhard Dutz, who I know as the founder, one of the founders of Vietnam Supply Chain, which I might add has a lot of fantastic events, and is the leading organization in Vietnam with a tremendous team. Eckhard is currently the General Director of Rappi B2B Office Solutions and also the General Manager of Pacific Partners. And he has unique expertise in sourcing of high-value, fast-moving consumer goods in Vietnam and across the region. And before that, he has a very unique background with Unilever, having been in Vietnam, Thailand, the Netherlands, and Germany. So with, again, a very holistic view. We have two panelists who have hands-on experience across Asia, but also with a global perspective to see the trends. E-commerce, as you know, has many areas of definition. And the exciting thing is it's in the transformation stage and still evolving very rapidly. The US started driving the e-commerce breakout many years ago. We know the models of Amazon, as an example, which was discussed yesterday. eBay, where interestingly 90% of the individuals who transact on eBay do global shipments. But one of the trends is that most e-commerce transactions occur within individual major countries, still. So there's still a huge opportunity of expanding. Even when you look at Alibaba with their upcoming IPO, Alibaba, with massive activities, is mainly focused still on China because it's such a huge market, just like Amazon has done. So how will these entities not only dominate in the space they're in geographically, but how will they gradually extend and create scaling opportunities in the region? This affects payments as well. So with that, I'd like to start off with Keith, and tell us your perspective on how you see e-commerce evolving and what are the opportunities in Asia and the impact on the supply chain.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everyone. How many of you were in the presentation yesterday that we gave on actionable intelligence? Okay, I just want to get a good look at your faces. You'll be my victims today to ask questions of. So actionable intelligence is a core part to e-commerce. If you mention the name Amazon, immediately you think about how well they're able to understand what your buying patterns are when you look around on their site, when you go to purchase anything, and yet they've never met you before. It's like as if you go to a kopitiam. I have a favorite one in Tiong Bahru Market in Singapore, and I go over there, and the auntie who's making the coffee for me, she knows exactly what I want. Kopi, a little bit sweeter. And she goes and spins it up, and I pay about $1, Singapore dollar. It looks to me like she takes more effort than Starbucks ever did. They taste just as delicious. Toby, are you here in the room to make sure? And the connection with the consumer is made there on a very traditional level. Just like the Starbucks barista we heard about yesterday, there's actionable intelligence in the person's mind. But when they're not there, you lose that. When you're not there as an e-commerce shop, it's just a plain website, the person buys, you didn't collect any information, or if you did, you didn't really know what to do with it, then you're also not there. You're not that CopyTM. You're not connecting with the consumer. Amazon's done amazingly, not just because of the supply chain, but Toby and I were talking yesterday. She says, Keith, you know, they know exactly what book I want to buy next. And they have like a 70, 80% chance of suggesting the right book to me when I open their website. That's a great way to sell. That's a great way to deliver commerce, e-commerce. And so I want to just, to answer your point here about what's necessary is connecting and understanding the consumer in an unobtrusive way. This is very important. There's a lot of information that we do have, our governments and our businesses, but we cannot be obtrusive about it. It has to be suggestive, friendly, and connected.
Eckhart, maybe you can give a different perspective from Vietnam and the way the sourcing models are evolving from your experience with fast-moving consumer goods in Vietnam and also in the ASEAN region.
Maybe I would like to just relate a little bit to what Keith has mentioned, because one of the activities we are doing, we import products from China, about 2,000 non-food products, which we sell through really all different channels. We sell that to supermarkets, we sell that to the traditional trade in Vietnam. We also call on some large B2B accounts, for example, schools or catering companies. And the fourth channel is actually e-commerce. So if I just look into the overall development of the sales volume, then the story about e-commerce is pretty clear, that it's a strong growth, it's highly dynamic, and in most technical developments, whether it is the iPhone or anything else, it always follows this kind of a S shape. Any kind of a development follows the S shape. So we are now in that steep increase, and that's what you also can see in different markets. We had a presentation from Lazada. Lazada is one of those copycat Amazons funded out of Germany. And they are in the developing markets, and they set up this kind of a e-commerce website. Zalora, Lazada, all of them try also to capture a large share. And in their presentation also, they just show the e-commerce increase in China. And just in 4 years, the volume is a tenfold. Yeah, so that shows the dynamic. Specifically now for Vietnam, you can see that a strong growth in B2C e-commerce. And what you also then can see, that the majority of problems are actually related to logistics. Yeah? I mean, the customer interface is definitely one part, and that is as you explained also, there's a different level of sophistication. And it will make a difference also in terms of customer retention if you have more information and better information to offer. But then on the other challenge is then on the logistics side, where you have these companies are dealing with maybe fourfold increase in a very short time. And all of these orders then needs to be packed and delivered and so on. So that is definitely one thing which also explains the dynamic. Coming back to the other question on the sourcing side. On the sourcing side, just to explain a little bit our background, we source products from Vietnam and export those to the Pacific Islands, which is a very small market and economically definitely not one of the key markets. But at least it gives us the opportunity to see the development on the supply place in Vietnam. And there I have to say, e-commerce does not yet play any major role yet. If you look in this part of the world. If I look then how companies from Europe source in Vietnam, you see much more development. You see that these intermediates are more and more cut out. People directly approach the suppliers and engage in transaction. And that is probably the other element. So strong growth on the consumer side and cutting out the intermediates on the sourcing side.
Keith would like to just give a little holistic perspective on the e-commerce trends developing now. So if you'd like to share some of your information.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I want to connect with what you talked about in terms of the supply chain. Being able to deliver to that customer is as important as knowing what the customer wants. You have to make the connection between both of them. And I'll see here if there's a presentation has come up to the front. And what I want you to take away from the presentation is, what is it that we can use as supply chain leaders, even as bankers, where can we apply social media? Yesterday you heard about actionable intelligence. From this presentation, I'd like for you to see 2 points. How do you acquire intelligence? And how do you then take action on it so that you can deliver to that customer, meet the brand promise, make sure to maintain your brand perception. So at Estee Lauder, I was there for 13 years and created an intelligence organization. Part of that was this link between the marketing team. Marketing always looks at social media. The home of marketing these days is sometimes in the blog sphere, going on to the web and so forth. But do supply chain leaders go and see that information as well? Is there a connection that's being made? And so with a view toward being able to look at that, let's see if we can just move to the next slide. I'll cue it. So a quick introduction about myself. This is a quick view for those of you who haven't seen it. The bigger words mean more to me. Supply chain intelligence right at the center is what we're going to talk about today, but it's not, you can't look at one thing, one person, one customer one-dimensionally. You have to see them from multiple dimensions. Some of you will be tempted to look at your phones. We used to say Blackberries, but not too much longer. And because 168 million emails are sent every 60 seconds, and some of them are coming to you. More than 600 YouTube videos are being put up on the web every 60 seconds. More than 700,000, now more than 800,000 searches are going on Google about your product, about your service. What do you know about those searches? Are they searches for, this is a great product and I'd like to use it more? Or are the searches, I'm having a problem and I don't understand what to do next? How are we incorporating this information into our organizations? Not just marketing, but down at the supply chain level, financial risk, quality assurance. We looked at a study over these past couple of years on how are consumers influenced. If you know a consumer social network, then you're able to understand who will influence them to buy. We've always heard, oh, you have the circle of influence, right? But as consumers, we've volunteered our circle of influence to the telcos, as well as to Twitter, Facebook, Weibo, Rinrin, etc. Whatever your choice is. We have this, and WhatsApp in particular, worth $15 billion. As I look around the room, each one of you is worth about 10 cents because that's how much the market values your personal information. Your entire contact network is worth 10 cents. And so when you look at that, it's because if one of you says, I love this product, then other people in your network will be influenced by it. If one of you goes into a store and says, I really hated my experience, the rest of your friends can be influenced by that. So if we look at the video here, We'll take a look at acquisition, or if you want, just tell me when it's ready and I'll move on to the next slide. So we have a video here that talks about how you can do customer information acquisition, because in order to understand your customers, you have to meet them at their time of need. You have to be able to link with them, hear what they're saying about your product or service. If you're a bank, how does a person feel when they came through and interacted with your services? Were they happy? Was there too long a line? When they got to the teller, how did they feel? Did they answer their questions? Some banks might have, did I do good service or not? Yes or no. But there's no context to that. I don't know what type of services or products a person was happy or sad about. Maybe they were happy about the deposit and sad about the withdrawal. So there's other aspects of information that we want to be able to look at. So we're going to look now at a retail view. A person walks into a retail store and how they can be engaged. So this is, if there's no sound, then I'll just skip past. Don't worry. Okay. So I'll just tell you the gist of the video, which is a person walks into a retail store, and typically we use our smartphone devices, our big data devices, to decide, look on a map, where's the retail store, go into the store, sometimes do product comparisons. A study showed that 63% of the time, consumers are, once they're in the store, looking at their cell phone and seeing, can I get this for a better price nearby or online? Is this the latest model? Is 40% of the time. And is there a newer model coming out? Should I wait? And other questions we ask with our big data device that we have almost all opted to pay $1,500 for, and over a lifetime value, we'll pay tens of thousands of dollars after years and years of data subscriptions. In order to then access that information and make a decision on the supply chain, we need to see, was the consumer happy or sad? In that video, you would have seen that the salesperson has in their hand a smart device. Finally, the retailer, using the iPhone or an iPad, to be able to look at Tumblr and see what's the current information I want to know about that product. Because in the retail world, there's a high turnover. People don't last more than 1 to 2 years in a sales role. So the training effort's tremendous. On top of that, whether I have the product available or not is a question. Is it easy to get from another store? Apple's done a great job of that, in that they say, hey, if you can't find it in the store, we'll ship it to your home. And of course, Amazon has done an amazing job. We set your expectations. It'll take 3 to 10 days to get to you, depending on where you are in the world. So setting expectations can be just as good a job as delivering to what the consumer wants. But in the case that there is an out of stock, which is a supply chain issue, the part that Dr. Eckert highlighted, hey, we weren't able to deliver. Let's take a look at how social media can be used to connect with that and understand. Go ahead to the next slide. So with an out of stock point at Estee Lauder, we saw this tweet come out. Don't even get me started on how many times I went to Estee Lauder counter while I was in Georgia, the state, and I couldn't find my product. In addition, I went online and ordered it from Bloomingdales.com. So omni-channel, right? Went to the retail store, brick and mortar, also went online. Both cases, out of stock message. A consumer today does not write a letter to the Estee Lauder companies and says, I could not find and I'm very disappointed. Instead, what's much worse is she puts it on her social media, and we don't know how many people are impacted by this type of disappointment or the impact to our lifetime value of this customer. And so what we want to do is get ahead of it as much as possible, or at least be aware in the supply chain. This woman said, why Bobbi Brown? One of Estee Lauder's 29 brands, Bobbi Brown. Why did you discontinue this vanilla stick? It's very disappointing. And so what we did with this instead of just having marketing look at it, we said, well, in supply chain, let's see how this can be leveraged. So Dana is the person who did the tweet. And if we click into Dana, we get to see, well, she doesn't really have that many followers. Not a big impact to our brand perception. Should we care? If we miss 109 followers out of the 1 billion people that we sell to during the year, not a big deal. But looking at who is following her, one of them is Beauty in the Bag that has, come back, 20,000, more than 21,000 followers. So immediately we're seeing the social network, that map you saw before, getting a spreading amount of discontent and disappointment. And people that were using that vanilla stick now saying, wow, I might have to look for another one. Oh, you know what? I really like Lancome's. I always thought about buying it. Without even yet being able to know, hey, we do still have the vanilla stick in stock somewhere in the supply chain, just not at the point when the consumer needed it. And so the important part here is to put in a playbook, to be active with social media, to connect these three areas. On the left side, you can see consumer insights, marketing, going in doing their traditional job. Was my marketing great? How's my brand perception? They're leading this charge in social media, and should be. But then connecting in supply chain, going over to Dr. Eckert and saying, hey, we have an end-to-end supply chain view. Your manufacturing sites in it, your DCs in that as well. Do we have stock available? Can we move that product there appropriately? And then being able to check that inventory using actionable intelligence I talked about yesterday, having your end-to-end supply chain view. This is where it becomes practical. One person mentioned to me this morning, Ramon from Logistics Asia, he said, Keith, how do we get really practical? Where's the rubber to the road here? And here's where it is. Right down in the weeds, what is and who's executing on this information from our consumers. The last point, customer service. Going back to that consumer in an unobtrusive and constructive way to say, yes, we do have the product available. And so then here's a view of the inventory that we were able to react to. Where is it in our supply chain? Is it at one of the 200 manufacturing supply chain nodes? Is it at one of the 20,000 retail stores around the world? And this is where the opportunity lies. And if you go to now here, we can respond back, choose to respond back. And this is about your bank, your supply chain, your organization deciding, how do we engage with the consumer? Do we tell them something? Do we try to put stock in there? Is it weird to tell them something? We looked at L'Oreal, and they were communicating with their consumers. Their response was, hey, contact our customer service department at this phone number. Passive. If you want to know more, you can call us. We took a different approach and said, hey, in a different example, we respond. This hasn't been discontinued. You can get it from here. So there's a way to decide how you want to engage. And it's a bit of, trying it out today. Trying not to be too scary with someone. Hey, you're monitoring my tweet feed or my personal Facebook profile. But at the same time, if they say at your brand, then taking a moment to, taking the time to care about the consumer. To be the copy TM who knows the consumer, even though we didn't see them originally. So that's the basis for connecting social media with the supply chain, with the way we engage and understand our consumers in a very practical example.
And just as a quick follow-up before we shift, how do you see the predictive forecasting and the predictive consumer behavior tools having a major impact on sales forecast accuracy and the stock holding? What trends have you seen evolving as a result?
Looking at predictive is a heady and challenging step. SAS, who goes and talks a great deal about being able to predict and prescribe what consumers will do, there's good low-hanging fruit around that. Basic trends that we haven't gone in to analyze as much as we could. The challenge with predictive is, do we have enough information in our model? We spoke yesterday when we said, do you connect already your supply chain and sales? If not, then how can you get predictive? Because we still don't have enough of the external information. If we still haven't, in a previous conference, someone said, but Keith, we don't have the capability in our organization to tell stories about data, to take action like this, then you're a couple steps away from using predictive. But let me see by a show of hands, how many of you have a data scientist or a predictive analytics group in your organization? One person tempted to raise a hand back there? Or you maybe keeping it secret?
I think this was predictive.
Yes. Okay, exactly. So before we get to predictive, I see that we have to act as visualizing our business today. If you go to the next slide, I'll connect to what you're saying, Paul, here. This is a vision for actionable intelligence. Having a shared service organization, meaning wherever the pain point is in your organization, is the part of the org that can get into it. So for banks, a lot of times it's customer retention. So you might have a group that is shared service and then delivering analysis about who's your consumer, what do they need, why don't they come back? And having both an internal view of data and an external view. So to be truly predictive, I need to know, hey, where are my consumers coming from? What did my coupon deliver? And there's an app in Singapore which lets you do something called geofencing. And it does not so much predictive, but takes action. It says if you're within a 2-kilometer radius, then we'll offer you a discount of 20%. If you're within a 500-meter radius, we'll offer you a discount of 5%. And let's see how the consumer reacts. First, we have to acquire data. Then after going and acquiring it, we can then begin to model how effective is the 20% coupon? How effective is the 5% coupon? And at what distance from my location? At what time of day? At what type of weather? At what type of year or season? Who is the person? There's so much data to know before you can get predictive. And so ultimately there's a rapid and iterative model. You come out with a visualization with these sets of data, your company data, customer information, suppliers, supply chain, your competitors, social media. Then finally you bring that together and you answer your big business question, customer retention or inventory control or customer service or more sales. Once you get the first answer, you always can refine. And this is where you get to predictive again. Now I get to refine and improve and get my model better and better until I really have an Amazon-like. Amazon, if you just study Amazon and Zappos, you'll be in good shape for this type of topic and seeing what great looks like in predictive.
Two small examples to support Keith's point. One on involving social media. I think there has been this article about Velveeta. I think it's this spread cheese, which has been around for a long time, and sales was continuously declining. And what the company Kraft, I think, found out is it was more sensible to promote the product among the heavy users. It's a bit contradiction here. You would not say, okay, if they're already loyal to the brand, how can I increase the sales? And that's also what they found out through social media, that this group of diehard brand fans who are still willing to even purchase more, maybe in different product formats and so on. And that's also only possible if you have this information. Second point, on your low-hanging fruits, I remember that's already maybe 12 years ago, Walmart in Germany, when they acquired a company, they also look into the deployment of items which people typically buy when it's going to get cold. So the moment that the temperature goes below 8 degrees, they will deploy those items which people normally buy, gloves and scarves and all of that, and they look into just the data, what people normally going to buy if they purchase those items, and that helped them a lot to just avoid out of stock, because you have this kind of a cyclical purchasing behavior. So there are low-hanging fruits, as you said, but the capabilities all the way up to Amazon is a wide span.
It is.
Maybe, Eckhard, from your unique perspective, from Unilever, you saw the global view of one of the top consumer companies in the world. And in Vietnam now, you have, what, 88.5 million plus population, maybe 70% demographics is under age 35, and mobile apps are heavily involved. And then in your own case, from your own activities, you're sourcing, just as an example, as you said earlier, 2,000 different products from China alone, plus other countries. How do you see, when you look from the global perspective, and then from ASEAN and Vietnam, and you mentioned Lazada earlier as a good example, how do you see that evolution in e-business, e-commerce, with that new demographics in Asia, the supply chain? And I'm leaving it as an ambiguous space for you to play with, but how do you see, from your global perspective and now from your micro view within Vietnam and ASEAN, how do you see the key trends evolving in this region?
Okay, that's a broad question. In terms of the situation in Vietnam, you have this young population and also this very fast adaptation. So this drives e-commerce a lot from both ends. It drives it from the demand side, because people get more and more used to buy online, and secondly, like in Vietnam, it's a very entrepreneurial country. You also have many startups who want to participate in this one. And also, when I look in our business, when it comes to this channel, it's never difficult to fill a position, because the young generation want to be part of that. So there's a lot of drive in that sector. That would be one thing. Secondly, the economics realities are sometimes a little bit ignored. What I mean with that, if you look into e-commerce, you have this delivery all the way up to the office desk or to back home, and that is normally which is reasonably expensive. So to find solution on how to deal with, let's say, new models to deliver all of these small orders to the customer is one very big challenge, and I can tell you need to have deep pockets like Rocket International in order to play that game, because you need to offer a very strong customer service. So that's why you cannot have too many, too high delivery cost or minimum orders and everything. And you need to play around to make sure that on the one hand you can drive the business through volume, and on the other hand you don't burn too much of capital. One other aspect in that one that doesn't come from Vietnam, I just read it recently. It's a little bit also linked to this kind of involvement of social media. I saw in I think the Netherlands and in Germany, they now have some website offering where they involve private people or taxi companies to do the last mile distribution. And that is also a typical case, where all of a sudden a new business model evolves just in order to have an answer to deliver low value orders to the final customer. So the point I want to make is this kind of a dynamic situation where you have a strong growth in some sectors. If you talk to people in Lazada, for them 4 weeks is a long period. From 4 weeks maybe, or within a period of 2 months, they would change from own distribution into complete outsourced distribution. Something the large companies, the Unilevers of the world, they would take about 2 months to just assemble the project team to start. So it's high dynamic. And if you look into the number of products they're selling, the CEO mentioned in a presentation now they have 50,000 products online, and they aim at 1 million within a year. So these kind of figures illustrate that in this field you need to be innovative, creative. You need to take risk in all of that, and that's probably also one part of the fascination of it. Huh?
To your point, I mean, just to let you know how fast this moves, a few months ago, 2 students in Singapore started their own company called the Tech Society. And you mentioned the transport taxi. They created a company 2 months ago, and they've already created an app to integrate 33,000 cabs across Singapore. And they've already signed a contract in 60 days. And they haven't even gotten their degrees yet. This is how fast it's moving. You know, you have an interesting environment because when you look at Vietnam, TVM Group was doing TVs and movies, and then you have the internet is going into the houses, which the government is driving, government-related companies. And now they're trying to link consumer goods and even learning languages into it. So even Vietnam is actually converging pretty fast into the space, and the game activity on the phones is another form of e-commerce. With, you know, Korea makes tremendous amounts of money just in that space. How do you see, for a second back to you, Edgar, how do you see the transformation of the e-commerce on the phone, the interaction, the way it's evolving in Vietnam and ASEAN, and at the same time, the traditional comfort of going out and selecting the items? How do you see that convergence happening in this region?
I mean, if you look into Vietnam in the market, or if you look into Southeast Asia, you have this different development stage. Huh? So being in Vietnam, you can always look to Indonesia, you can always look to Thailand to see how channels have developed. And like in Vietnam, you have that situation that maybe still 75% of the consumer goods are sold through traditional trade, through wholesaler, personal relation, and the tourists would come then to Chinatown in order to see that as a very fascinating part of their holiday trip. So that is still going on the one hand, and on the other hand, you see this e-commerce, plus also what you see now, a very clear trend to omni-channel, because the big retail companies like a Casino Group, Big C, they now actively involve into e-commerce, and they use their network of shops also to facilitate sales and distribution. You see that also with one of these fast-growing telecommunication chains, which also then are able to capture customer around their stores, and then also have even a better delivery performance, because their distance to the customer is closer than it is for the average e-commerce side. So you see all of that going on. On the left-hand side, you still see the cyclo, the bicycle. On the other side, you see some very advanced technology, and that's the reality on the ground.
How has your own trading business been impacted by e-commerce?
No, for us, it's great, because for us e-commerce is big enough to be interesting, but it is not so big that we have to invest a lot of money. So I mean, with our business, we can learn from the successes of some of those coupon websites, etc., etc. We can just pick up the learnings and then apply them to our range of products. And that strategy is also okay, because we don't have to pay for the mistakes of others.
Keith, you look at, from your background globally again and in the region, actionable intelligence, which impacts so many different touch points with the consumer. How do you see that integrating with e-commerce in terms of bank payments and facilitation? How is that evolving? What are the trends you see?
In terms of bank payments, and let me come to that, I wanted to speak to Dr. Ecker's point on linking to the consumer and e-commerce. If you aren't in a place today where you have an e-commerce channel to either provide funding, you're going to get replaced by things like Bitcoin. If you're not in a place today where you can provide products online to your consumers where they feel comfortable to buy from that site, you'll be replaced by the likes of Q0010 and Alibaba and so forth. Are we poised, are we positioned to stop you can't stop. To put a pause to, you can't pause. To really leap forward and jump into these technologies and use them, like he said, within 60 days. Google, the Google Glass should never have been made by Google. It should have been built in Japan 20 years ago, because every Japanese cartoon and video has that type of technology in it. But they didn't say to their staff, you know what, you take 10% of your day and go ahead and try something new. By the way, we'll fund it for you. Large corporations have the money to allow their staff to do micro projects. Think of how 2 college students can deliver a new app within 60 days. How much would that cost a company? You wouldn't even, it's a rounding error on the books that it takes, 15 days to close. It should only take a day to close your books. The process and change for commerce and technology needs to be faster in the companies that have enough money. And we need to care about it. Here's an example of what happens if you don't go ahead and make sure to have product available in e-commerce channels here in Asia. So out of stock, I can't get the product easily from the Takashimaya because it's far away. It's not at a close point of distribution like Dr. Eckert said. So the consumer's response is, I have other sources. So Estee Lauder has a extended supply chain, but then monitoring social media, we discovered we had another supply chain that we didn't know about. It was interesting. We hadn't hired these people. They aren't on our payroll. Paul talked very positively about leveraging some of these. We were spending tens of millions of dollars on advertising, but this supply chain didn't share their P&L with us for some reason. They were on Amazon, an e-commerce platform, which Estee Lauder doesn't play on for brand equity. They are on Facebook, delivering thousands of products. How many of you have Facebook 3,700 friends? That's pretty good. So this is a person or a business delivering MAC products to lots of people around the world and getting great feedback on Amazon. So this is great, says Larissa. My Clinique soap was delivered earlier than I expected. We want to hire these people into our supply chain. So you can't even say, well, I'm not sure, I don't want to invest. Go ahead, don't invest, and this is what will happen. Your market share will be stolen right from underneath you. A friend of mine runs another cosmetics company out of Los Angeles, and all of a sudden she said, hey, people are copying our product and selling it because she doesn't have an effective e-commerce position in Amazon and in other places. And so she's spending lots of money on marketing, advertising, consumer engagement, and then the profit and the top line sales are going to strangers that somehow get their hand on the product. And then there's negative risk to it. So from a bank's perspective, I mean, I have this as a product view because that's where I came from. But you don't need to look far to say if you're not playing in the e-commerce space in a way that supports these type of transactions, the trade financing necessary to support that cab, and you just leave it to VCs all the time, there'll be a VC bank that replaces yours. There'll be an online bank that allows financing out of Google. They say, hey, we finance all these projects internally, we'll just finance it externally. Google already has a VC fund. Why not go into banking? What are you doing as a bank to deliver unique ways to connect with the consumer, to provide them with financing that's different than your competitors? You have to ask yourself, what makes you different and where do my consumers need me to be?
So in banking, we're already seeing by 2016, the forecast is 86% of the value of transactions will be by electronic payments, right? So those banks that are still relying on the traditional LCs, the traditional methodology, they're already going to be disintermediated again. And I think that's the real challenge, right? Whether it's consumer goods or banking, any area, if you don't evolve rapidly, seeing these trends, you can actually have students outmaneuvering you.
Right.
And that's in every space. And then Bitcoin came out of nowhere, but of course it'll be regulated in reverse soon. So because it shocked the system. And PayPal, well, long ago it evolved. So there are already new banking systems that never existed, and the regulatory environment wasn't even there to touch them. Let me give you an open space, Eckhard. What are some of the areas and trends that you'd like to highlight as we narrow down on the timing today?
Yeah. What we can see out of Vietnam is an increasing trend on the sourcing side. I mean, just recently I spoke to the buyer from Walmart who source a lot of products out of Vietnam and also places like Cambodia. And that clearly shows me that now we have a global sourcing, and it is still very much restricted by lack of finance. That's interesting to see, because the volume which a company like Walmart would source is so large, and Vietnamese supplier may have some limitation financially. So I see that as a very clear trend. We see this kind of a clustering. You see that if you look into the sourcing landscape, that countries will specialize on certain industry. Like if I take Vietnam, there's a very good strength in manual craft, furniture, some of the food products, and that's what we can see. Up to very high quality products which are sourced. So we see this kind of a global sourcing situation, mass customization. I'm sure you would be a good person to highlight on that, but that is definitely also something which we can see. Omni-channel, we touched about it, that it's all about connecting the different channels. And then on data, we also mentioned that this also will play a major role in terms of in terms of making better decisions. Then this smartphone thing, we talked about it, but then also up to the point that you can see product availability and pricing. So if that is possible, you know, you have to completely review your distribution strategy, because all of a sudden the customer can see in how many places the product is available, and then you would need to see, you know, what are the real channels you need to go so that you not over-distribute, under-distribute. So this is also a new trend. Then on the logistics side, you have these kind of a super grid companies, the companies, the DHL of this world, who have a network spanning around all places. So they are then in a position to participate on global sourcing because they can provide all the services needed. So interesting enough, at least for me, because I come to Vietnam '96 and I felt, I now only share what I have learned in the last 15 years out of Germany and to that, and not so much is happening. And I have to say, if I now look in the current situation, it's getting even more exciting. And sitting next to gentlemen which have stimulating ideas, etc., is even more. And that's probably the nice disruptive element of e-commerce, that it really requires a fresh look, new business system, new skills, and financing, obviously.
We'll go to the audience in 1 second. Just a quick question to both of you out of the box is, Alibaba is coming out of nowhere, $50 billion valuation expected, or more, on the New York Stock Exchange soon. But it's still mainly China. And they're still penetrating in China. They can do that for the next 10 or 20 years. There's that much growth potential. And China, e-commerce is growing 5 times faster than the United States. Even though the US invented this, quote unquote, China is 5 times faster now on an annual basis. These trends are enormous. But here's Alibaba growing in China, the tremendous market, and out of nowhere, Lazada comes up and attacks the consumer space in Southeast Asia. Just a quick pulse from both of you. How do you see that opportunity with e-commerce, and let's talk about consumer goods, which you both have strong backgrounds in. Where is the space for a few players in Asia to scale and dominate Asia, or is it actually so deep the opportunity that an Amazon will go deep in China and Lazada will do ASEAN and then others will break out in individual countries? How do you see that e-commerce model evolving in consumer goods in the next 10 years?
Maybe just a quick one, because I am not too deeply involved in it. What I see in e-commerce is that only as a number one, you make it. So the first to market and to have a critical mass of consumers is so important. So the Lazadas of this world who have made experience in developing markets and who can move fast and who can scale fast, they definitely have a benefit. And if their whole business case is a overall working out, I would see them in a good situation. But because that is not necessarily known to us, in terms of the financial side, it is a bit of a speculation. But being a number one and being fast is definitely a very important input, and that's not easy to achieve and not easy to imitate.
And most of e-commerce that we see in like with Amazon and Alibaba, it's still domestic. They dominate a country, but that global scale isn't there yet. So let me throw the same question back to you. What trends do you see evolving in the next 10 years here in Asia?
As a professor, I like to ask questions, so I will leave it to the audience to answer this point. I'm kind of curious, since I asked you all about predictive and no one raised their hand. How many of you know what Alibaba does for their business model? That's a very small percentage of people. Ramon and Suresh, can I ask both of you to team together and tell us a little bit about Alibaba, because most of the audience doesn't know.
Professor Monga.
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question as well. What do they do?
But I asked a question, you asked a question, now you're asking one back. That's called triangulation, right?
Help us narrow down.
So what can we do? Toby, do you want to?
Alibaba is that they started out as business to business, and they were bringing products from the huge manufacturing pools of China, and they did actually, they're known around the world through businesses. If you want to buy power generator equipment or refrigerator bits and pieces, they would be the one to turn to, but they did build up a business to consumer or a consumer to consumer business with Taobao, and then they came up with their own version of PayPal, which really superpowered the thing for the domestic purposes, because it was so hard for e-commerce companies to collect money in China, and that was what really made them interesting. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's very helpful. And the B2B gave them their fixed costs. It allowed them to build the network profitably. And then when they brought in, as you say, when they brought in the consumer side, who could compete? Anyone else would have bled in that space. So it actually was, whether it was planned or coincidental, it allowed them to grab that space very uniquely.
And let's
it
add,
didn't hurt that China shut part of the market off to foreign competition as well.
Let's just add into that, though, that the China Construction Bank and other major Chinese banks didn't want to lend, as you said, to small businesses. And so Alibaba came in and said, you're not lending to small businesses, we will. We'll help facilitate this e-commerce. Sir.
Just the point to add there on Alibaba is, just a point to add there, and this is just a comment, is what gets listed is the e-commerce business. What is not getting listed is the Alipay business. So the valuations that you're talking about right now is only to do with the e-commerce business. And that says a lot in terms of the potential of what Alipay can potentially be a threat to the banks of the world.
Yeah, it's going to be rivaling Google and Facebook and others ultimately. You're right. Please, other questions from the audience? And then we have to ask questions back to the audience, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Worked well, please.
Mega trend, what is happening in the world. Nobody expected that
digitals will come and take away Kodak films, and similarly iPhone will come and the music industry disappear. What will happen to this e-commerce industry? Just megatrend 30 years, 40 years down the line. What are the new technology and new things can come which can be a threat to this e-commerce?
I think for the 3D printing that Paul mentioned yesterday, for certain products that we use, that might be an interesting way to deliver designs right to your home. You buy a printer, and now you just buy the template, and you can print things. Unfortunately, 26-year-olds have been printing guns, and that's not very good. That's not the design we want them to print. But maybe there's more constructive points for 3D printing to be used right at the home or right at that point of distribution. I don't see e-commerce going away. I see the dollar going away. I see ATMs going away faster, and e-commerce being the platform, phones perhaps being replaced by a unobtrusive Google Glass. We still don't like phones, right? We have to put it to our ear. We crash into cars when we're reading text or crossing the street. There's something better out there, and once we have that plus commerce, you have the next good platform that replaces the dollar.
Eckhart, 30 years into the future, what do you see?
There's some developments which come much slower than expected. So I also would share the view that there's a lot of improvement potential on e-commerce to make it just even more convenient, more safe, more connected, more selective. So that will take several years, plus some technological development on top of that. Plus the coexistence, because I'm sure that even the declining retail sector may also then have very much an e-commerce front end. You mentioned that maybe the retail industry has not made a big effort to try to integrate multimedia on the point of sales. So I think there is still a lot of way to further improve that, and people want to be confronted with product offer everywhere where they are. So whether it's at home or at work or in another space, so that situation remains.
I can't help resisting adding a comment on that one too. There's already hologram technology which will allow you in your living room to see yourself at full life size. It's already there. They're just bringing the cost down. You'll see it in probably about 2 more years. Already you can do holograms this size. For Skype and other calls. It's about 20,000 now, the cost. They're bringing it down. I think in 30 years, you'll have a hologram of yourself, and when you're shopping online, you'll actually see yourself changing in front of you. And I think you'll actually print the product, and it will appear in your house. That's where we're going. That's where 3D printing is evolving. They're already making organs. They're already making blood vessels. And this thing only came out a few years ago. And holograms are already there. So imagine, instead of a little avatar on a computer screen, which we already have today, imagine a life-size hologram, and you're shopping online, and you actually see what you look like, life-size, and then you press a button, and it prints in your house. Now, how will the shipping lines and freight forwarders survive that space? So this goes back. I mean, this is so exciting. The trends that Keith has mentioned, and Eckhart, and yesterday's discussions, which I'm very passionate about, everything is changing. And when you look at the future, everything that we do is being disintermediated. The way we shop, the way we produce, the way we do banking. And anyone who doesn't grab that trend, including banks, including traditional manufacturers, including logistics companies, will be disintermediated. But those who grab it, even kids out of college who have never even done anything, can outmaneuver banks and major institutions. That's what's so exciting. So please, other question from the audience. We have just a couple more minutes. Please. A little louder, please. Can you get a mic over there, please?
Thank you. I'm asking this from a perspective of consumer goods company. So with the introduction of e-commerce, consumers or shoppers, they are becoming increasingly impatient because you expect fast delivery and on-time delivery as you promised. So how do you ensure that consumer goods company is able to keep up with this increasing pressure to deliver on time quickly? So you say if you promise an online shopping website that you'll be able to deliver within 2 days, while making sure that your physical distribution capability can cope with that while keeping your cost of serving manageable.
Maybe just a quick answer to that one. If you look, because we partly touched on that, on the retail side, you will have better information to make sure that out of stock doesn't happen on the shelf. So that's like for the traditional trade, and for e-commerce, indeed, you need to be mindful of the time, because any increase by some hours will increase your cancellation rate. Huh? That's a key thing, and that is this kind of a e-commerce challenge. How can I deliver even low value orders in a fast time? That typically is in most countries very expensive. Huh? So that's where we need to have some innovations, or these kind of a pick-up points. You know, that you have a pick-up points where people then go halfway to that one. So we will see definitely new offerings and new solutions to make sure that the customer is met. And it's also about expectation and managing that expectation. Huh? Sometimes customers don't need to have it in a rush. It's more like the guaranteed promise that you're going to deliver on time.
Yeah, so to Dr. Eckert's point, for me it's very, very simple as you walk out of this room today, what you need to do. Be able to deliver actionable intelligence. Do you know what your consumer is going to buy? Are you sharing data across your organization? To Dr. Eckert's point, do we know how much is in stock, what they need? Actionable intelligence, putting that framework together, breaking down silos. That's what we have to deliver as you walk out of the room today. If you haven't put money aside in your budget to do it, then you're already behind.
So we're
Yes,
just
quick
running
question.
out of time. Quick question.
On Walmart, everything on shopping is now experience, and I've been corrected that there is a stigma in someone going to a Walmart shop. There's a segmentation of customers in New York that would not go into a Walmart shop. So they've started an online walmartonline.com. So with all this personalization, I mean, one of the grudges of going to shopping is to go and do your groceries every day or every 3 days, which I do myself. I mean, but I don't see any disruptive technologies in terms of bringing fresh food stuff to your home, like your yogurt and stuff like that you don't have to go every 3 days or every 4 days. What is that going to have an impact on the channels like Walmart and I don't know.
Quick 30-second answer.
Just one. There is a disruptive technology. I think you presented once these terminals where you can order your groceries on the subway station in Korea. I think where you only have like a virtual shop front, and then you're gonna select your products, and they will deliver that to your home. Huh? So grocery shopping, I think, is definitely one area which will increase in terms of e-commerce.
Just two things. In the States, we have something called Peapod. They do this. You set up a regular order. You want steak on Monday, salad on Tuesday, and they will deliver either what level you want to spend is the type of food they'll send to you on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then in Singapore, there's Redshift, which is a Red Mart. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Which does do that type of delivery.
And a company 10 years ago in Seattle started this, groceries online, and then they expanded into Canada, and they just didn't scale at that time. They were ahead of the market. So it's coming too. I think we're out of time, and I'm not going to summarize all the invaluable information that was shared by our two distinguished speakers, because 80% of what we want to discuss, we don't know about yet, because this is e-commerce. So whatever we've talked about today is just the initial transition point. Predictive forecasting, intelligence of the market, the new touch points, the redefinition of every segment of industry because of e-commerce. And actually, most of what we need to know, we don't know because it's still to be defined by visionaries in the future. And that's what makes this area so exciting. So thank you for your time, and thank you to our distinguished speakers.
Thank you to our speakers and our moderator. If you could please take a few minutes to fill out the feedback form and turn it in outside at the desk next to the door. We will now take a 20-minute coffee break. If you would please be back in the room at 10:30. Thank you.